had an experience a few months ago. We had a customer come in and they were making these large panels, and it would take them 8 hours to make, I want to say it was 10 panels. From blanking, from raw stock to finished goods, it was taking them 8 hours to do 10 panels. We made their panels on our S4P4 line, our FMS system, and we pumped out one panel in under 4 minutes. And they were flabbergasted, floored, they couldn't believe it.
Hi, this is Tim Heston, Senior Editor at the Fabricator magazine, and thank you so much for joining us for this final episode of Automation Talk, presented by FMA in partnership with Fabricating America. That was Derrick Clark, Senior Product and Technology Engineer at Fabricating America, during a conversation at FABTECH last month. Clark described that headline-grabbing kind of automation, but it's not the only kind. Some projects do indeed lend themselves to such productivity transformations, but it's not the only way automation is taking hold in metal fabrication. Let's consider the big picture by looking back through the episodes of Automation Talk. We've had Kendall Howard, a high product mix fabricator that has literally built a business model on automation. That automation affects how the company processes orders on the front end and effectively how work flows throughout the entire business. We've covered Cyrell up in Canada, an architectural fabricator that's using automation to overcome not only the acute labor shortage we all know about, but also to give new kinds of career opportunities to its best employees. And we've covered Schindler Elevator, whose Hanover, Pennsylvania plant is a prime example of end-to-end automation, with order processing automation married with optimal shop floor flow. Two key drivers are behind all this. The most obvious is the lack of skilled labor. Better technology helps get the most out of the talent that people have. The second, and perhaps most overlooked driver, though, is the predictable high-velocity throughput automation allows. And here Clark offered significant insight. Predictable velocity isn't just about putting a bunch of robots on the floor.
A lot of people, when they're thinking automation, are thinking robots. A lot of times, it's not always the case. For us, a lot of what we do is more with conveyor systems, things like this. We see a lot of other customers, they think it's got to be batch style production, or you've got to have kit style production. We talk to them, we figure out what they want, and we steer them in the right direction. A lot of it's all about the velocity and the mix that they want to run and what they want to do, but you can go from raw stock to finished goods in a few minutes, honestly.
In a few minutes?
Yeah.
Let's talk about velocity for a second, because I know for a lot of our readers, it's a big issue, especially with interest rates rising, cost of money rising. You don't want whip sitting on the floor. You want to keep it moving. So how do you communicate velocity to them? And obviously, over the years, you've gotten them away from inches per minute. Well, it's more than inches per minute. What's the broad view of velocity when you talk about that?
So velocity is not just speed of the machine as far as it is how fast you can form it, it's how fast you can punch it, laser cut it, anything like that, but it's also getting it from machine to machine. So the different conveyor systems, transfer systems, things like that, having parts queued up so that once a part finishes, let's say on a panel bender, okay, and that part's getting pushed off, the next part is being brought in, dropped off, and it's ready to go right now when we're not having to wait. Everything's constantly moving, everything's constantly flowing. That's a big part of the velocity aspect of it. To keep everything rolling as fast as possible.
That philosophy of keeping everything rolling in a predictable way applies to different levels of automation we've been talking about throughout this series. Level 1 automation is machine-level automation, where someone places a workpiece into the work envelope, the machine or processes it, and a finished part emerges. A robotic welder fits into this category, as does a panel bender. Level 2 introduces material handling before and after the machine, and Level 3 extends that automation throughout the process, from order processing through the shop floor. All this sounds great, but how does a shop get started? In most cases, shops take baby steps through the levels. For instance, this often starts with a panel bender. Here, my colleague Rob Colman at Canadian Fabricating and Welding magazine talked with Nate Gevedon, product and technology engineer at Salvagnini, about how the company works with shops just starting to consider the technology. I'll let Nate take it from here.
Everyone thinks that a panel bender just bends panel style parts. You know, your simple 4 90-degree bends, and that's it. But in this case, with the Salvagnini panel bender, it's not the case. We have what's considered the universal bending tool. So it allows us to be able to bend different geometries, different profiles, different box sizes, different box depths, all with the same tools that are equipped into the panel bender.
People tend to think panel bender is a step up from press brake, but that's not really the case. Talk a little bit about, panel benders versus press brakes. One's more valuable to you than the other, pros and cons of one versus the other.
I mean, it also depends on the production, what you're physically running. Because the panel bender can be used in various types of ways. We can blend the production between a panel bender and a press brake naturally. Because on a press brake, you know that to do different types of profiles and different geometries, it all depends on the style of tool you have in the press brake. So if, for example, I need to do some hem bending on a panel, where on a press brake you need a specific tool setup, where on the panel bender there is no specific tool setup. It's a natural bending cycle automatically created inside of the machine. So we can blend the two technologies naturally. I can do the 80% on the panel bender and leave those maybe very deep, tall bends for the press brake to finish. So instead of doing 100% on the press brake, we do 80% of that specific part on the panel bender, and we finish the last 20% there.
Now we're talking about automation in our series of videos. We're talking about levels of automation, and I think some people might look at a panel bender compared to a press brake. You could think, oh, that's my first step in automation, is moving to a panel bender or something like that. Tell me what you think about when you think about automation and what automation really means.
Automation can be introduced in any stage of a production. So automation can be introduced at the forefront or in the end or any time in between there. It is all dependent on what our customer or the industry decides they want to do, what point they want to introduce automation. For example, we talk about a press brake. A press brake's main goal is to reduce the amount of times we change the tools, the amount of times the operator has to spend time doing something other than producing parts. So how would I automate a manual type machine? You could do that inside of the office. You could automate the production sequence, okay? By Salvagnini, we have a software called OPS, which is our order processing system. It allows Salvagnini to mitigate and control order in data, order out data. So we speak to the machine, and we speak to the ERP system. And within OPS, we can organize the production in a way that the operator spends less time adjusting the tool setup and more time producing the parts.
Automation can be introduced at any stage of production to ensure people spend less time adjusting and more time producing. That perhaps is the biggest takeaway from this entire series. The key to achieving this is to look at the big picture, how work flows from quote to cash. Next, consider that first level of automation, be it at the machine or front office processes. How would automating that process affect other processes? What would the ripple effects be? What other processes could be automated throughout the value stream? Next, climb up a level and introduce that material handling automation, which starts to connect the processes. Finally, start asking questions about how you can get to that top-level ideal when work flows seamlessly from quote to cash, and people specialize in the exceptions and perfecting the overall flow. At that point, a day in the life of a fabricator's employee aligns more closely with what customers really care about. Not about how many parts per hour a machine produces, but how quickly the shop can deliver quality products when and where they're needed. So with that, for more information on automation, You can check out prior episodes in this series through the links below. Also, check out continuing coverage from FMA, Canadian Fabricating and Welding, and of course, the Fabricator magazine. So on behalf of Salvagnini America and all of us at FMA, thanks for joining us for Automation Talk, and here's to a happy and productive 2023.